There's nothing more infuriating in golf than a bad break. Your whole round can go to hell when one of those happen. But today we're not going to talk just about that. We're going to talk about how to handle them well, what to do when you do get a bad break, and how to prevent it from putting your round up in flames. All right, so Sam, a bad break in golf is something we all know and we all hate. They happen to every one of us, no matter our skill level. So let's talk about the two possible ways we can handle that situation. The good way to handle that situation, which we'll get to. But first, the scenario that we all have no doubt done at some point. We let one bad break after a good shot send us into a downward spiral. So let's take it back to that moment. You hit a good shot, you think it's tracking the pin, you think it's gonna turn out well, and all of a sudden, a weird kick into a bunker, and you're annoyed.
Right.
So I guess, what should we do?
Well, speaking from experience,
You have deep experience in downward spirals.
I have less experience with the good shot part of it, but what I perceive to be an okay shot ends up in a terrible spot. This happens all the time, and then for whatever reason, it doesn't draw the outcome I was expecting, and then I start lamenting it. I start, thinking there are all these forces conspiring against me, and I allow it to carry into my next shot, maybe even the rest of the round. Happens all the time. I start thinking, oh my God, if only for not hitting that sprinkler head, I would be, even par through 3, and now I'm 4 over. And there's nothing productive coming out of that. And worse, it suddenly puts a negative, I have a negative vibe over every shot.
Yeah, and this is a really important point. It's actually something that we talked about after your awesome cover story with Joel Damon, that you were hitting a bunch of good shots that day. And then you hit one not so good shot, and then suddenly you're allowing this one shot to sort of, you're catastrophizing it, right? You're letting it spiral, and it becomes indicative of like, oh, well, if I did this shot, then I could hit other shots like this and my round could go south. And that really is the worst possible thing you can do after a bad shot or an unlucky shot, right?
100%. And what I did that day when I do often is it's like a negativity bias, right? We all have this negativity bias where, for me, I probably hit X number of good shots that day, but the bad shots and the bad breaks, weighed much heavier in my mind. And I adjusted to those way more than I was adjusting or thinking about the positive shots. And my inability to move on from that and compartmentalize those bad shots was a huge mistake, because and we're going to talk about what good players do. What good players do is they accept them to be isolated events that have nothing to do with what happens in the future, other than the fact that you have a lie and a shot you have to execute, but they move on from it. I think, again, bad players, and I'm putting myself in that category, tend to spend a lot of time on all the things that went wrong, and they're unable to move on from it as a result.
Yeah, they start focusing on what went wrong, what could have gone right. That was a big thing for me as a junior golfer. I wanted to hit this shot so well, or I wanted to make this putt so badly that, I hit the putt, it doesn't go in, and then I start redoing it over and over in my mind. Oh, it actually broke more this way. I've been practicing this. How did I let that slip? And all of a sudden, you're walking to the next hole, but so much of your energy is focused on something that's already happened. And it's sort of creating, as you were saying, this like feedback loop, this spiral of, why did I do this? Why am I doing this? And suddenly everything moving forward is taking on this like negative frame of reference, right? And so I think that brings us nicely to the things that we see tour players do so well. So let's go back to that shot. You hit a good shot, you like it in the air, takes a weird kick into a bunker.
Yeah.
Like, how is like a tour pro handling something?
Before we get to tour players, let me just tell you a story about just like an average club player like myself, and how someone handled it really well. Which differs from the way I would handle it. I'm in this, inconsequential member guest match against a guy, hits a shot into the right. We finally find his ball. It's buried in the rough, and it's almost embedded, to the point where I say, I think you can get a drop here. And he looks at the lie and he says, I've gotten good breaks all day. I'll hit this shot. And he sort of crouches down and just takes kind of a huge whack at it, and hits it on the green and makes par. It was an incredible shot. And what made it incredible was not only because it was, a severely difficult lie to emerge from, but his ability to just say, this happens. This is part of golf. I've gotten good breaks all day, which no one ever does.
Yeah.
No one ever thinks about all the good things that went their way,
Yeah.
and saw it as an opportunity to do something really special, which he did. And for me, that really stuck with me because it just showed the difference between like a winning mindset of being grateful for the opportunity you had, and then being able to sort of move on from what was probably still was a really bad break, and just realizing that's part of the game.
I feel like this is like a cliche that pops up in golf all the time, that sometimes like the best golfers are the ones that like maybe aren't the smartest, or the ones who don't like think too deeply about this, because an event will happen and then they'll just move on from it. You know, they hit a couple bad shots in a row and they're not really fretting it. They're just on to the next one. And there's a certain inevitability that like, well, I might hit this one good, or I will hit this one good. And I think that speaks to something that you were talking about earlier, whereas, you know, Joel Damon, the guy you played with on the cover story, or just pros in general, they tend to treat these bad shots as isolated events. So I guess, like, for the viewers, what does that mean exactly?
Well, I mean, what it means essentially is that what happened on your second shot should have no bearing on what you do on your third shot. It's in the past. It has no relevance to your ability to execute the next moment, and your ability to move on from it is not only going to be beneficial for you from just being able to focus on what you're having, but you're not planting this negative seed in your head. We all have this, again, this negativity bias where we tend to focus more on the bad outcomes, and the good players are just able to move on. They're in the sports psychology world, they talk about the internal locus of control, the external locus of control. So everything that happens in the past is external, it's outside of your control. The things you can control are the things in internal locus of control. So when we say it's an isolated event, you're saying, okay, that's over, put it away. I'm now going to focus on things I have some say over, and you're moving on.
That's really the key quality that good golfers have, right? That they're able to treat one event and put it behind them and then move on to the next one without spending too much of their energy thinking about it, dwelling on it. And that allows them to just kind of keep moving forward, right?
I think, it's worth noting that most people think, good golfers don't see the trouble in golf. They don't see the challenge in golf. That's not true. I think the best golfers see that golf is hard.
Yeah.
They realize that things go wrong. You can't control everything. And so they weigh everything accordingly. You'll hear Tiger Woods, talk about, at the height of his career, hitting an approach shot to 20 feet, where we're watching on TV, like, that wasn't that good. And he'll be like, that was an amazing shot.
Yeah, you see this all the time with pros. They'll pick up on these little moments that the rest of us don't even realize are happening. They'll talk about these, like a 4-foot par putt on the 7th hole, or to your point, like a wedge shot to 20 feet after a series of missed greens, or whatever. They're able to identify these moments and in some way just spin them into like a positive momentum shifter for their round.
And that's like, I think it stems from a level of humility, understanding that like a lot of golf is a lot of elements are outside of your control. And so when you do something well, or relatively well, or it's not catastrophic, that's worth celebrating and building on. And, we talk about all the time, US Opens, good bogeys. Why do guys, learn to accept bogeys in US Opens more than they accept it, at the Waste Management in Phoenix? Because they know it's really hard. They're framing that whole week differently than any other week. And they're able to say, okay, everyone's getting bad breaks this week. Everyone's going to make a double bogey at some point. So my ability to make, a bogey in a situation where it could have been a lot worse, they start saying, oh, that was pretty good. I can work with that.
Ultimately, just to kind of wrap this, our advice to golfers like us when we have a bad break is to say, do your best to leave what's already happened behind you. That's like the big
one, sure.
Right? And then there's also, try to reframe anything you can as a chance to do something positive, right? That, even if it's a short putt for bogey, just that could be a win with the right sort of mental framework, right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, like, there's all kinds of positive outcomes from a really bad break. One is Yes, you hit this miraculous shot out of a terrible lie and you make birdie. Okay, that's unlikely,
Hmm.
but that's a possibility. But another sort of positive outcome, I'm using air quotes, is this potentially catastrophic event was just bad. It
Yeah.
ended up being a 5 when it could have been a 6.
Hmm.
And my ability to limit the damage there and then move on is worth celebrating and worth building on as well.
And you can build a good round off of that too.
100%.